And with that, we're going to do something a little different and switch over to Modern Love Hyderabad on Prime. Michael, what was it about?
Yeah, so for those of you that are familiar with the Modern Love franchise, if you will, we have Modern Love Mumbai, which we have covered and highly recommend watching that review as well if you haven't. But these are all kind of spinning off of the original, New York Modern Love that starred a bunch of staple actors. But Modern Love Hyderabad is very similar. We have 6 episodes here where in each episode we explore kind of a different, unique story of a different love development. And we have a bunch of different characters throughout them as well. And, just like with the other ones, what I really love about this kind of a series is that we get to explore like different characters and the different like uniqueness or different like choices they have to make that are relative to their lives. Because often like when we think of our own love lives or we think about, kind of what we see, we kind of have it like set in our head, like what you need to do in order to, make something like this work in your life. But if you're a stand-up comedian or you're a CEO running a company, which are 2 characters that were in a couple of our episodes, you see that like a lot of these things are different and that the choices you make in those situations, given where you are at the moment, could be vastly different, or what you're going through may be vastly different than what you may think a lot of people do. So for that, like I love like the basis of this show and what it does. Now I will say that like, and I think Shreya will definitely agree with me on this, is that a lot of this was pretty predictable. And unlike other TV shows or movies where we watch where we know, like one that comes to mind is Mr. Malcolm's List. Like that was a movie in which was predictable. They were able to do it in a way where I was still like enjoying it and I still had like reasons to watch even though I knew what was going to happen at the end. A lot of times in these episodes, like you'd get 10 minutes in and kind of see where it was heading, and there really wasn't that drive to keep watching all the way through. And then whenever it did get to the end, whenever it did get to the moment that you guessed right from the very beginning, it was just like kind of saw this coming all along. Like there really wasn't anything more interesting now that I actually know what the ending is. So in terms of my thoughts, like I said, I love the basis of this series. Like I always find it really interesting to watch these like individual these individual portraits of people's lives. But this one was, like I said, pretty predictable. I think I liked Modern Love Mumbai better, so highly recommend going to watch that if you haven't. But yeah, overall, those are my thoughts. Shreya, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything Michael had said. So in Modern Love Hyderabad, we kind of follow these love stories, but I want to say that they're not love stories in the traditional way that like romance love is. You kind of look at the story between like a mother and a daughter who fall out because they are both Muslims, but she has decided to marry a Shia man and they're like Sunni Muslims, so she leaves home and she's like, it doesn't matter to me as long as he's like part of my religion, what sector he belongs to. And so they break up over that, and then they meet again in a couple years and they're starting to work through their differences, and it's like familial love. Another one is about like a CEO who grows up out of an orphanage and he tries to understand his grandmother's backstory of why she was forced to leave him in the orphanage in the first place. And it's love in like all of these little spaces that you naturally just don't you don't get to explore. Like you don't think of love in those places. When you say love story, you're like, oh, it's automatic like romance. But it's not like that. It's like these little slice of life stories, and I want to say that they were very adorable. They're very cute. They really tugged on your heartstrings, but exactly what Michael said, like a majority of the time, they're either incredibly predictable, or there's just like so many pieces to this story that you don't understand where it's heading. For example, when we were watching the story about the CEO who, he's like owner of a company and he's like giving a motivational speech to his employees. And then after a while, he talks about, he like goes to an orphanage to distribute gifts. And it turns out that it's the orphanage that he actually grew up in. And then we all of a sudden shift to the story of his grandmother. And at first you don't understand where the link even is. But then as the story keeps going, you understand, you're like, okay, so his grandmother was forced to leave the grandson at the orphanage. And then you try to figure out why. And then everything beyond that point becomes predictable. It's like either you constantly know what's going to happen or you're confused and putting the little pieces together. That being said, I think that's like a problem that anthologies just have in general because they have such little time to tell such an elaborate story. They either have to pick such a small sector where like the story is just so immediately available and like you can pick it up really quickly, or it's so small that there's not enough detail for you to understand the situation. I think that's just the nature of the work. Now, when it comes down to like cinematography, angling, switching between the stories, I think the theme was great. The theme was really beautiful, and it showed slice of life stories where love isn't just all about romance. It's not about attraction. It talks about it in all these little tiny places, and I thought that was an incredible way to weave all the stories together. I also I also really like the actors, but I will say I like the actors in some episodes and I didn't like the actors in others. Like my unlikely pandemic partner, where we're again talking about the mother-daughter Muslim duo, they were incredible. They were phenomenal. Like starring, I think it was starring Revati and Nitya Menon, if I'm not wrong. And these like minute facial expressions that they have going on, there's just so much emotion behind like their eyes and like the quivering of their lips, and it's beautiful. But then again, I get to Fuzzy Purple and Full of Thorns and I'm like, okay, maybe not you. So I will say the actors and the acting was a hit or miss based on how much I liked the story. Typically I think I want to say that the acting was more likely based off of a weak script rather than the range of the actors themselves. When it comes to locations and settings, I think the varied locations of all of them is so beautiful. I'm glad that they weren't all set in the same place. Like one was during the COVID pandemic, one is like in the little classroom, one is in an orphanage, as we mentioned. Like they're all these little places, like in Finding Your Penguin, I think where I think they're like talking about like they're literally out in the woods and they're kind of like having a little laugh fit moment. I thought that was really cute. The locations were stunning. I actually thought that everybody was quite good looking for who they were portraying, and I thought the actors were also well. Like I can't complain about any lightings. I can't complain about any camera angling. I can't complain about most things. Typically, like even editing wise, I thought it was okay, but there wasn't anything crazy going on. We don't see big action scenes. We don't see big romance scenes. We don't see big drama scenes. It's all like the tiniest bit of life, and you just get to see like somebody just living like every day, and it's supposed to be relatable moments, which I appreciated. So
But a lot of times too, these are untold stories. Like what I really like about the Sunni and the Shia Muslim episode is that like this is probably, you know, a conflict that a lot of people do face whenever they are, you know, starting the next chapter of their lives, and that kind of family drama that occurs or in the arguments. And then, you know, as you said, like the minute expressions that were going on, like if you're watching that, it looks like very real expressions of like mother-daughter just like not agreeing on anything. And the fact that like they're telling these like stories, like it does make you like kind of reshift your thinking. Like you are almost in a sense watching someone else's life, and that's quite powerful. That's why I really do like this anthology series. You know, everything that you said, I 100% agree with. But just hitting that more, like these anthology series, I think are important to watch because, you know, kind of coming out of it, you get this wider perspective on like what other people may go through and what it is they go through, how they're feeling, ultimately how they overcome it too. So really enjoy it. If they made another one, I would definitely watch it again. And I really like how they vary the stories up between the other ones. Like if you watch Modern Love Mumbai, these stories were all almost 100% unique, and I think they did it pretty well, other than the very predictable nature of it.
Absolutely. There's actually some varied tonation in all of them too. Like About That Rustle in the Bushes was about two people meeting on a matrimonial site, and it's hilarious. And like Finding Your Penguin, it's hilarious. But then there's like the one that was like Fuzzy Purple and Full of Thorns and My Unlikely Pandemic Partner, which are on the deeper side. So at least there's like varied emotions. And I personally recommend that you watch all of them just because they all have some kind of like small message that probably everyone can relate to. However, will you realistically like all of them? Not really. Did all of us realistically like all of them? No, we didn't. Hence why we did not give it a perfect 10 out of 10, but you should definitely still check it out because it is now available on Prime.